Hello, and welcome to the Jordan Warburton Occurrence. If you're new here, my name's Jordan. I started this podcast to talk openly about my experience with mental health and to keep learning and growing as a human as I, go along and evolve. So today's episode is something I wasn't sure I'd ever really speak about openly, but through a bit of reflection, I realised it's a pretty important conversation to have. So this episode comes from my own personal struggle with regret, and if I'm honest, how I handle those feelings pretty poorly. Because a certain kind of regret doesn't shout out at you. It doesn't demand attention. It just sits quietly in the background. So after a big emotional shift in my life, which I'll talk about a little bit detail in a bit, I found myself struggling, not so much with the situation itself, but with the feelings that came after it. This episode isn't about the details of the breakdown or anything. It's about what it felt like to sit with regret, guilt, and really uncomfortable emotions, and what I learnt from dealing with them. So, through my life, I've sat with regret for many different reasons, but the biggest one in my life that I think I've suffered probably was a breakdown of a marriage, and it was a really big emotional shift for me. I sort of got left alone with my feelings. I had my family and friends to turn to, but they weren't there 24/7, so the thoughts were just sort of latching their way into the back of my mind. And it's just this weird situation I found myself in where I didn't find regret sort of arrived loudly into my life. It sort of crept in. It was like little seeds planted in the back of my mind. And then it just kept having, random thoughts loop in. Is this all my fault? Could I have done more? Really quiet moments. It became really heavy and really hard to deal with in the time. And I don't want this episode to be about blame or the juicy details of what's gone in my life, but I want it more to be how I struggled with the feelings. So I'm not here to explain my past, really. I'm just exploring my inner experience through these feelings. So let's go on to talk about what the struggle actually felt like. So it's this weird situation where, like I said, it was seeds were planted in my mind, and it didn't come knocking until much later on. Probably about 18 months after me and my wife split, and it just, I don't know. It felt like it was a bit unclear what was causing the regret, and it just came across as not so much redundant, but weird feelings of not good enough, I guess, and I didn't do enough, and I should have done more, and it led in this weird cycle where this guilt that I had didn't lead to any solutions in my life. It was just sort of looking for closure that I'd never get. So it just kept me wanting to do something with the feeling, and just constantly chasing after, clear myself of guilt. It was something that took me a while to figure out how to deal with it. I couldn't just snap my fingers and it was gone. I found myself then becoming frustrated at just being stuck in this loop and not being able to fix it. And I left this sort of probably in this weird past and present moment where I was thinking about the past, but it was blocking me from moving in the present and looking towards the future, because I just in this weird circle going through these different feelings of guilt, different reasons. Was it, and then it led into other aspects of my life, and it was maybe I'm not a good enough father, maybe I'm just not a good enough person, and it sort of rotted me to my core in a really bad way, and it's why I think I struggled so much last year, towards the end of the year, where it all came to head. This leads me into how I tried to escape it, rather than facing it. I don't know, those feelings are like started, I'd probably say May, June 2025. They were just like starting to rear their ugly head. And I was just, doing the usual thing that people say to do, staying busy, going for walks, finding something to distract me, whether it's gaming or, going just out of the house so I wasn't stuck, being on my own with my thoughts when I had free time. And it just, this sort of led me into this weird path of, instead of feeling my feelings, I was just thinking about them. And it led me to just keep thinking about it, overthinking. And it just wasn't a good headspace. And from that, it just sort of led into more frustration because I wanted clarity rather than acceptance of it. So I was more like, I wanted clarity in my, what I thought were like failures in my life, rather than accepting the feelings, if that makes any sense. And then this is where, before I sort of clicked, I started to like quickly realise, well, I would say quickly, it took me almost 6 months to realise, but because I kept avoiding the feeling, I was just keeping it alive. It just kept brewing, and I, push it down to keep coming back up. So this is where like I sort of ended up having this internal shift. I can't even say it's a big anything happened. It was more my mind just sort of went, you need to stop avoiding it. You need to face it. You need to deal with it. And then it was a weird sort of realisation when I sat there, and I was like, you know what, not everything needs a solution, especially my emotions. Sometimes I just need to feel them, just be part of it, embrace what they're trying to tell me. And it sort of made me realise that regret and guilt isn't really punishment, it's information. And I like to put a positive spin on everything. It's just information on how to do better. And I thought that was a really nice way to like look at it. And then this also led me down the path of like, it's good to just let feelings exist. Don't have to label them. Don't have to be a good or bad feeling. It can just be a feeling. What I sort of internally sort of looked and decided that, you're meant to feel feelings. You don't have to solve them. You don't have to be good or bad. It's just feelings. And feelings will pass. At least what feelings will. And that's when I was having these realizations. It just sort of took this zoomed out perspective of my life then. And I was like, the amount of times I've wrestled with feelings, fought them to not exist or wish they didn't exist. I was just wasting energy. I should just observe them and take a step back and realise trying to tell me something is something I need to deal with. This made me realise that I was sort of punishing myself for things I could never change. It's sort of taking me out of myself, and like I was present but wasn't present, if that makes any sense. And like one of my main anchor thoughts, I guess, if that's a good way to put it, the feeling isn't here to hurt me, it's here to be felt. I think that's just a nice way to like rationalise it in my brain. You may not be like this if you're listening, but it was just that realisation in my mind that feelings are feelings. They're not here. I'm not trying to hurt myself mentally. I'm just trying to feel them. So what helped me personally was just actually realising sometimes it's better to just sit with the discomfort, the feelings, sort of rationalise them. I keep saying rationalise, but You can't rationalize feelings. Just feeling them and understanding that they're there. And you're not going to go anywhere by avoiding them and just pretend like they don't exist or kind of distract myself from feeling them because it just doesn't lead anywhere good. You end up in this situation where, well, like me, it just comes to a head, and you feel in a worse place for not hitting them head on. There we are. Words are hard, and then it sort of gave me this new philosophy towards my how I deal with my emotions on a regular basis, and that's just naming them and being honest with myself what they actually are, whether it's guilt, regret, or happy, sad. Just naming how I'm feeling makes my life easier to understand what's going on in my head. So avoiding it, never fixing any of that. And then this is where the biggest shift for me was. It was sort of separating responsibility from my regret, because it was I sort of turned it into a self-attack, and that's not a healthy mindset to have, to like blame yourself, to like think that's always the problem, or you could have done more. There's many facets of regret and guilt that are just so hard to deal with, and putting the attack on you doesn't make it any easier. It makes it harder, and it was a really hard lesson to learn. But it did teach me that realizing your self-worth and how hard you've come, how hard you've worked, and how far you've come, sort of makes you realize that no journey is black and white. There's so many forks in the road where things could have happened differently at any point. But the way life turns out is the way life turns out. You never know what journey you're going to be on, and it's not always going to be fun. You're not always going to enjoy, but you just take lessons and understand what you need to do moving forward. So I speak about healing a lot, and it's this weird thing where people say like you want to heal out loud, but it's never loud. It's quiet. It's sitting in your own storm. It's not like, oh, I gotta go here and I'm healed. It's magic, yay! It's like that. Sometimes you're gonna find a bend in the road that brings you back to, just before where you started. But don't mean you give up. You just keep going and figure out how to get past that hurdle, or bend in the road, or make a new road. You should enjoy yourself more. Take time for you. I spoke in one of my previous episodes about how I don't get much time, and I filled out the little time I do have with my kids, and then the time I don't have my kids, I was sort of sofa rotting and just not enjoying. I was just existing, and I was unhealthy because like I said, I went healing. I was just autopilot. I was like, I'll just sit on the sofa and do nothing, essentially. Watch TV, stay in the house all day, and nothing. And it just really affected my mental health in a bad way, living like that. And everyone goes on about 10-minute walk really helps, but the truth of it all, it does. Because I remember December, I woke up and I was like, I really don't feel great. Like, I'm feeling in a really dark place right now. So I went for a walk, and on our walk, I went just like, oh, you know what? Some of my friends got kids. I'm gonna go pick up some selection boxes and go drop them off. And then I'd done that, and then one of them was in. It was all on a whim. One of them was in for a cuppa, and it changed my mood for the day. It just felt so much better, and that's sort of when I went, this is what I need to do. I need to be out doing things and enjoying. And then this also led me into another step of acceptance where it's just like, no matter how much regret I feel, no matter how much I want to blame myself for life, I can't change it now. I've got to embrace it. I got to look at what I've learned, how I got to where I am, where my mental well-being's been for, you know, was almost 2 years, and understand that it's healing is a journey. It's never easy, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be really hard sometimes. But you got to back yourself more. You got to put more pride into being happy for yourself. So, before I move on to the last part of this episode, I just want to quickly say, if you like this podcast, liking, subscribing, commenting really does help the channel more than you realise. It shows off to YouTube, Spotify, wherever you may be listening. I can't remember the name of all the platforms because I forget. But if you want to support the podcast further, I do have a Patreon, and I'm going to start sharing like extra reactions and behind the scenes thoughts for anyone who wants to go a bit deeper. I might throw out scripts as well where, you know, you can tell me if this subject sounds good to talk about it. But no expectations at all. I'm just grateful you're here, you're listening, and I hope you're enjoying. So the final part of this guilt I want to talk about was actually letting go of it. And it was this weird mindset they had. It was like, I have to let go, forget about it. But that's not the right way to deal with it, because you can't forget about it. You can't throw away stuff that's happening in your life. You can't forget about it, and it does you no good. All you can do is remember the feeling, take lessons away if you can, because sometimes you feel secondhand guilt and it's not your fault. I can't excuse things because it's done. Things happen. It's done. I can't excuse this, that, or anything else. And I'm not here to rewrite the past because it's happened. And then take these three sort of points and then integrate that into a lesson for now. And you sort of shift from being stuck here to using what's here to now, bringing you back to the present moment. And it was so lovely to feel that like weight lift off my shoulders, bring me to now, and realise life is for living. It's not for living in the past. You can't go back there. You can't change things. You can't make things better now because it takes away what you've learnt now. Do what you can in the moment and move forward. Feel your feelings, but don't avoid them, because it just, like it happened to me. It was a seed rotted me from the inside out, and I never want to have to sort of feel like that again, because it was awful. It's probably let's go there. It's 100% the lowest I've ever been in my life, and I really don't want people to feel the way that I did ever, because it was frightening to be in that mindset. So let's close this episode out, and let's remember, regret doesn't mean failure. It just means you cared. You don't need answers from your past to move forward. You should be more present. Embrace the now. Enjoy the now. Life is for living. Letting go isn't about leaving the past behind. It's about coming back to yourself. Regret and guilt have this weird way to convince us that we need answers before we have to move forward. But what I've personally learned is that present and presence matter more than understanding and accepting. And the more you can do that and embrace it, the better you are to move on to the next chapter of life. So I'm going to leave you all with this question. If there's something you're still replaying in your mind, not because it needs fixing, but because it has been yet felt. If there is, maybe you don't need to push it away or solve it. Maybe just sit with it for a moment. As always, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. This has been the Joan Warburton Occurrence. Bye!